Hi, I'm Dave. Welcome to Dave Takes It On. Well, the world is winding itself up into a real knicker-twisting frenzy. The anti-EV brigade prove that EVs cannot take over. They're damaging the planet. They're already bankrupt. Look at Ford. They won't be forced into EVs by corrupt governments. They do not reduce pollution anyway. That's all down to China. Well, the list is endless and the pace is increasing. But is there any truth in this? Are we being lied to? What is the real state of play with EVs? Well, Dave Takes It On dives in deep and finds out a number of startling facts that you have not been told. But let's start with a few easy ones. Are EV sales dropping off a cliff? Are there thousands of unwanted, unsaleable EVs in dealers around the world? Are fleet sales propping up collapsing private buyer demand? Are manufacturers making huge losses on every EV they sell? Well, as always, the answer is, well, yes and no. But that's a lot of questions, so let's look at these one by one. So the first one we're going to tackle is EV sales. Are they collapsing? No. EV sales are booming and are pretty much on track. Growth in sales of new EVs this year is likely to end up at around 50% higher than last year. New EV sales are nice and healthy. Tesla, as the largest, has increased sales from 1.31 million last year to 1.32 million this year, but that's only for the first 3 quarters. There's another quarter to go. So the likely figure Tesla will end up with is 1.8 million for the whole of the year. Well, that would represent a 40% growth in EVs sold year over year. BYD, similarly, 1.1 million this year to date, compared to 0.6 million last year to date. That's an 80% growth in EV sales. So EV sales are really very healthy and growing nicely. But are the thousands of new EVs in dealers' premises totally unsold and unwanted? Yes. Ford and GM and Stellantis have seen demand absolutely crash, and the cars they've produced are largely unsold and unwanted. Even with grants, tax breaks and subsidies, they just cannot sell those new EVs. Are fleet sales covering up a crash in private buyer demand? Well, both yes and no. Private buyers' demand is well down. Interest rates are really high, EVs are priced way too dear. So private buyers are definitely backing off from buying new EVs. But, and it's a really big but, most people long ago backed off buying in favour of leasing. And leasing is much cheaper than buying on a finance deal. Leasing an EV is often cheaper than leasing an ICE car. Up to 30% of new car drivers in the UK now lease their cars rather than buying them. And when they lease, well, obviously they don't buy one as well. So the move away from buying to leasing is causing a collapse in private sales. But, another big but, when a private person leases, the leasing company buys that car off the manufacturer and then leases it or rents it to the private customer. So a lease deal means one less private sale and one more fleet sale. And the private customer drives off in his or her brand new EV. Well, that is why the fleet sales are growing and the private sales are crashing. Just less of us are buying, more of us are leasing. It's really simple. Are manufacturers losing huge sums of money on every EV they sell? Well, some definitely are. They're losing a fortune. Ford is reported to be losing over $30,000 on every EV they sell. General Motors refuses to state how much they make or lose, but states they are aiming to break into a profit by 2030. Well, make your own conclusions. Looks like they're not making any at the moment. Well, Tesla, on the other hand, only makes EVs and they make a very healthy profit. In an industry with an average profit margin of around 5%, Tesla has plummeted, crashed disastrously recently, down to 7%. Ford does make a profit on its ICE and commercial businesses, and overall they achieve 5%. Toyota claims 9%. Chinese manufacturers are heavily subsidised, so even if they show a profit, it's difficult to tell if it's real. In truth, you can make healthy profits from EVs. You just need to build up to that mass production tipping point. Now, legacy auto are nowhere near that point. So Tesla, an EV-only company, despite heavy discounting, is right up there amongst them. So are EVs taking over? Ha! No, nowhere near, not yet. The total number of EVs manufactured in the whole world in 2022, the whole of the year, was around 10 million cars. 10 million. And that brought the total number of EVs on the road up to around 25 million in the whole world. That's true at the end of 2022. Well, their progress has been exponential, but we need to get real. There are 1.5 billion ICE cars on the road around the world. Did anyone seriously believe that they would all immediately send their ICE cars to the scrapyard and go out and buy an EV? It'd be lunacy to actually believe that. See, we in the UK have 35 million cars. Most of those are ICE. So the whole of the world's production of EVs does not yet manufacture enough to just supply the UK, let alone US, Europe, China. Well, anyone who has the idea that EVs are taking over by numbers is seriously deluded. EVs in 2022 represented about 14% of all new cars sold worldwide. That's fantastic. It's pretty much on track with what the EV manufacturers were aiming for. Sales in 2023 are looking likely to increase a further 50%. So a really healthy growth rate. Taking over? Not yet. So how come there are thousands of EVs unsold in dealers and legacy are reporting zero sales? Well, it's the easy one, and it's one that should come as no surprise. See, the early EVs from legacy auto were snapped up by the early adopters. Same with every industry, every product. These are people who go out and buy anything at any price. But there's only a limited number of those, and they now all have their EVs. And what they're starting to find is that, well, they're rather expensive, and they're not really very good. You see, a petrol Ford Mustang in the States sells today from about $30,000. The Mach-E electric Mustang starts at $50,000, but then very quickly rockets up to $65,000. Well, it is a lot faster, but it doesn't have that mighty V8 roaring away that they like. But strangely, and a fact that the petrol heads will never admit, the Mach-E has a greater range, the electric one. It claims, but will never get, 375 miles. In reality, it'll probably get around 250 on a full charge. Now, the mighty roaring V8 5-litre engine quotes an average of 14 miles per gallon out of a 16-gallon tank. And that makes 224 miles of range. Unless, of course, you put your foot down. Well, the same is true of GM and Stellantis. Their EV versions of their classics all were put up for sale between 50% and 100% dearer than their equivalent ICE model. Now seriously, would you buy a Vauxhall Astra petrol for $20,000 or an identical Vauxhall Astra EV for $40,000? That is a no-brainer. So now let's look at the buyers. If your budget is £20,000, you probably can't even get finance, or probably won't even be able to afford the repayments, to buy one at twice that price. And if you could, you'd be mad to do it. Yeah, Dave says it would be mad to buy an Astra EV. But they sold some, you shout. Yeah, the early adopters. But they've been and gone. Now we have serious buyers. For example, a Vauxhall Astra E costs £40,000. Mercedes-Benz CLA 180 petrol costs $38,000. What would you rather have, an Astra or a Mercedes? But if you really wanted an EV, then the Tesla Model 3 is on sale at around £40,000, same price as an Astra. Again, which would you rather drive in, an Astra or a Tesla? So after the initial rush, the early adopters, the sales of inferior legacy EVs simply dried up. I completely fail to understand why this came as a surprise. Did they really believe their customers were so loyal that they would pay twice the price for an inferior car? Well, spoiler alert, they didn't. Back to the point. Companies which have totally converted to making EVs only, they've gone through the pain of huge losses but come out on the other side, and they're now reaping their rewards. But they only make about 25 million a year. They get up to 50 million next year if things go well. Well, at that rate, to get rid of all ICE cars is going to take, 1,500 million years divided by 50, about 30 years. So where is all this panic coming from? Will EVs take over soon? I see many people saying that, they make 100 million cars a year worldwide, which is about 15% of those are EVs, or about 15 million a year, so to take over the total ICE market will take less than 10 years. But that's also total lunacy. First, that just covers new car sales and does nothing at all about the 1.5 billion ICE cars already on the road. But secondly, it's a big mistake. That presupposes that every single person who buys a new car buys a new EV, and that cannot happen. Remember, EVs are too expensive for most people to afford, and indeed they are. Plus, most people do not buy a new car. For every 100 million cars sold new, they sell around 500 million used cars. I myself, I've never bought a new car. I've had new ones as company cars loads of times, but never bought a new car. So a relatively small number of people can afford a new EV. So probably only around 1/3 of the new EV sales each year are going to be new buyers, that's well under 10 million, for EVs. Now the rest are just bought up by people who already have an EV, and they're just swapping or upgrading. So it's a very small number who will buy a new EV for the first time. The whole process is going to take a lot longer than people imagine. So Tesla announced they're planning to build 20 million EVs a year by 2030, and they'll dominate the industry. 20 million? Big deal. The new car market at the moment is around 100 million a year. So that means 80% will not be Teslas. That's some dominance. And don't forget, this does not tackle the 1.5 billion ICE cars already out there, nor supply enough used EVs for the 500 million people who buy used. So we come back to the original question, why are people panicking? And that's a really interesting one. Cars are getting more economical. Well, apart from the Ford Mustang, of course, but all the others are. See, once in the UK, the average was around about 20 miles per gallon. Now it's up over 35 miles to the gallon. In America, it was always hovering around the 14 mile per gallon, the big old V8s, and that's now risen to under 25 mile per gallon average. So, first fact, our cars are burning less fuel. Second, the growth of new car sales has reversed, and while still large, it's now heading lower. So many analysts predict that peak ICE car sales were reached nearly 10 years ago, and they're now fearing it will never get back anywhere near that again. Or third, many of us are driving a lot less. See, with congestion charges, many have taken to EVs, or buses, or the railways, or bikes, or electric scooters. With higher fuel prices, we drive less. See, we have higher mortgages or rent payments, higher energy bills, higher food bills. We have less money, and therefore we spend less on petrol and diesel. And so recently our average mileage has also dropped, quite dramatically so. For a long while it's hovering around 10,000, dropped to 8,000, and now for private drivers it's down to about 100 miles a week, 5,000 miles a year. That's it. We don't drive anywhere near as far, and we use less petrol to do it. So the amount of petrol and diesel burned has been dropping now for a rather long period of time, and the trend is downwards at an even faster pace. Now throw in things like COVID, where miles driven crashed to almost zero overnight, and the petrochemical industry has never recovered from that, and it's really beginning to panic. Yeah, they can hike prices to make record profits for a while, which they are doing. But there is a limit that is actually self-limiting. If they put the price of petrol up too high, people stop using their cars. They just can't afford to run one, particularly in time of high inflation. And if you lose one driver who finds an alternative form of transport, say a bike or a bus, you've probably lost them forever. So the oil companies cannot increase prices very much more. And sales are still decreasing and faster than ever. And oil is getting more expensive to get out of the ground as well. Because easy wells, they're starting to slow down their output. They're drying up. Not dry yet, but they're slowing down. So the writing is on the wall for all to see. First, the auto industry is seeing lower sales, and in some cases that will drop the volume of cars produced out of mass production. That immediately raises prices. That will force them to increase their prices at a time they desperately need to lower them because people can't afford them. Second, the petrochemical industry is heading downhill fast. Proof? Well, in the last few years, dozens of very large refineries have shut down and declared bankruptcy, and some really large ones at that. See, there's less demand. Mass production works here too. It only makes sense financially to go and drill in the Arctic for fresh oil supplies if they can make a huge profit to cover the costs. If sales continue to decline, that exploration will simply not be financially viable. And that will leave a dying industry eking out its last dwindling reserves of crude oil, unable to put up prices because the drivers can't afford it. So hence the OPEC panic measures. And it's really interesting to note that the last very recent slashing of output designed to raise profits has not done what they wanted it to do. They're having another go. Will this one succeed? I actually doubt it. I believe that oil has reached a price where it cannot go any higher without seriously affecting the market it's selling into. So the last thing the legacy auto industry and the fossil fuel industry needs is millions of EVs coming onto the roads using none of their products at all. The oil industry is getting into a panic and they're just lashing out at anything that might hurt their profits. And then along came Russia, who very kindly invaded Ukraine, and the West almost stopped using oil overnight, and many of them switched to renewables. Well, it's all turning against them, and they are powerless to stop it. But they can fight to slow down the descent, and that's what they are doing. And they find a willing army of followers blindly trailing in their wake. Is there genuinely anyone out there that would prefer burning petrol and diesel, which produces foul chemical pollutants and carcinogenic fumes that will kill us all prematurely? It turns out that burning oil is a bit like smoking. Well, everyone who does it knows they should stop. They know it's killing them, but it's just too much effort. Besides, some of the people who don't smoke get cancer and die, don't they? Surely smoking's not that bad. Same with cars. Surely it can't be that bad. Now, Andy Burnham winning his campaign to prevent the introduction of a ULEZ in Manchester being hailed as a great hero. Really? Is it heroic to condemn a generation of his citizens to die prematurely? Is that a victory he wants to celebrate? And is he willing to go and visit all of the relatives of all those who died prematurely as a result of illegal pollution levels in the very air they breathe? And I explained to them how he caused it all. His aim should be to get totally clean air in his city and make life better and longer for all his citizens. But the bigger problem is this perfect storm. As petrol prices rise, as pollution levels rise and kill more people, and as new ICE car sales continue to decline and they get dearer, we will head towards the crunch point where the cost of buying and running an ICE car will start to climb rapidly. At exactly the same time as the price of EVs continues to drop with mass production, and new EVs become available at an affordable price, like Chinese sub £20,000 car and Tesla sub £20,000 Model 2. This is the perfect storm developing. But drivers have no need to worry. They can carry on driving around in their ICE cars for many years to come. The end is clearly in sight, but the rich and powerful will fight right to the bitter end. But you've got to realise it is not your interest they are fighting for, is it? And EVs, well, they'll keep on selling all they can make, and they'll get cheaper and better, longer range, and more people will get solar panels, which is undergoing a bit of a boom as they get cheaper, and they'll be able to charge their own EVs with their own free electricity. Wow! A city with clean air and people generating their own electricity from solar panels and charging their own cars free of charge and driving round without producing any pollution. Whoa! That's something to aim for. Andy Burnham, have a listen to that last sentence. So when is all this going to happen? Well, I personally predict this will happen in 10 years. Yeah, just 10 years, and the ICE industry and the sale of ICE cars will be all but dead. The oil industry, reacting, will switch into chemicals and fertilisers and other products, and they will finally abandon petrol altogether, apart from it being a niche product for those who cling on to it. And every single auto manufacturer will have switched into the exponential growth that awaits those that can make good, affordable or cheap EVs. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Dave.
Well, thanks very much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, please click the like button. And if you would, please subscribe. It makes such a difference to us as a new channel. If you click the bell icon, the notification, you'll be notified the next time we launch a video. And a massive, massive, massive thank you, last but not least, to our Patreon members. This side of the business is growing dramatically. We've had our most successful month ever, and thank you so much for your support for the channel. I'm Dave.